notion of Dark Castle Pictures is that when you look what Bill Castle was doing, he was making essentially one-set movies. And he really had, you know, for his time, very advanced visual effects, and he had great marketing and promotional activities because he was very aware of all that. So we try to find movies that work in essentially for all those aesthetics.
This film is based on a 1960s 3D film when you actually had to wear glasses.
Bill Castle to the eye doctor one day, and they had that, you know, it was new, that kind of goofy thing that you put on where they kept turning the lenses, and he said, wow, what if you could see ghosts through those things, you know? So that's where the idea came from. You only could see the ghosts if you wore special glasses, and of course Bill Castle took that, you know, to its logical, well, or illogical extension, and he actually had three-dimensional glasses in the theater.
The audience would wear 3D glasses to see the spirits.
They're there. This thing just stirs them up. That's the best kind of ghost story.
Which we've actually incorporated into the movie rather than giving viewers to see what's going on.
In this version, the characters in the movie actually have to don these special glasses in order to be able to see the spirit world and what's going on there.
Some funky looking specs here.
William Castle was a very interesting filmmaker for the simple sake that he was always into some gimmick to bring people into the theater. He wanted to bring a little bit of that fun back into this film too. So our cast members do don the glasses when they're supposed to look for the ghosts. What we wanted to change is, of course, we wanted to contemporize the story. We wanted to bring a little bit more of the current editing styles, so it does become a far more dimensional experience.
Think about what you're saying. There's no such thing as ghosts.
It has a very contemporary slant. We change the story, we update it, and we use, you know, the highest end of, you know, state-of-the-art visual effects. Bob and I just love these movies, so we try to make them fun and exciting.
Howard Berger is our special makeup effects guy, and he's unbelievable. And Steve Beck, our director, gave Howard the tools and the palette to create whatever he wanted to create.
When I was first approached to do this movie, Steve came down to the studio to K&B Effects, and we met and went through everything, and we kind of talked about what each ghost is and all that. And what I found interesting right off the bat and what really intrigued me was that Steve wasn't looking at him like, okay, there's weird guy number 1 and weird guy number 2. He had a backstory for everybody, and that kind of helped us design some things.
We had an artist hired by K&B down in Los Angeles, and we did some comic book style artwork, really very broad concept. The realist aspect that you see in a lot of horror movies is thrown right out here. We're sort of tweaking on people's worst nightmares.
It's a way you've never seen ghosts before. You've never quite seen them like this.
Because at first when I read it, I'm like, you know, it's probably going to be 400 days of blue screen with ghosts like going, oh, I'm going to get you. And Steve said, we're not doing that. They are there on the set. You know, they're physically there. I thought, okay, that's going to be cool. So based on that, Steve really liked that stuff, and then he took it and did some design work, some maquettes, and what maquettes are, they're little clay sculptures that represent what the character could look like, so that the director can look at them from all angles.
Some of the makeups allowed us to play a little bit and actually design on the set. Do some makeups, march the actor in, have the director look at them, we roll some footage, have a look at them on camera in our dailies, decide what we liked and what we didn't like, and redesign as we went.
So we went ahead and did that, and Steve signed off on all of them. It's like, yeah, this is great, this is great, this is great. And from there, did some color tests, painting up the heads and all that stuff.
As you can see, I'm just adding detail with an airbrush to texturize it. You can see all this little dotting technique we have, and then we also highlight the structure, the shadow, and the highlight of the makeup. You can see I'm finding all the three-dimensional structure and just trying to highlight a little bit. Breaker came in, I think we started John about 4 o'clock this morning.
It's a pretty intense process to take one of these actors and turn him into a monster.
John's makeup is about 3 hours, I'd say, total, 3.5.
So it ranges. We have makeups that, like I said, can take an hour, and then we have a makeup that takes like 4 hours.
I think I'm the longest. It takes 4 to 5 hours to do my makeup because I have scars everywhere.
I've slashed myself with a knife. So far I've done a bathroom scene with Shannon Elizabeth where she's come in the bathroom but she doesn't know I'm there.
Is it too scary? I mean, you know, it's really scary.
And he's got a full foam bodysuit on. I know this looks like a bunch of little pieces glued on, but this entire thing is rubber. Right up to here. And then he's got a piece that goes on the neck and the lower part of the face. He's got earpieces on. He's got a forehead that encompasses the eyes and the nose. An upper lip piece, a chin piece that encompasses the chin, and then he's also got hands that glue on separate and blend off onto the bodysuit.
The more you do one character, the quicker you get. So when we, for Hammer, for instance, it initially took us 4 hours the first time, and now we have it down to, I think, about 2 hours. So that's pretty good. We bloody him up and we sweat him all down, and Steve wants everything really wet. He keeps going, juicy, make it juicy. I'm like, okay, juicy, here it comes. You know, spritz these guys and cover them with KY blood and all that stuff. You know, some of them have contact lenses, so their eyes are all kind of crazy.
I'm the contact lens technician, and as part of the costume, we put the contact lenses on the eyes and change the eye color. They don't have any power in them. They're just a cosmetic lens. In her case, she's got her contact lenses on, and we're putting this over top. It was fighting me, but we got it.
Something Steve always said, it's gotta be scary, and it's gotta be scary, it cannot be funny. And it's real hard because there's very little that scare people.
What we're doing what's called a float off in the business. Essentially, the area that's glued onto the face, all of those prosthetics are disposable, fully disposable. They get thrown away in the garbage and then we use a new pair tomorrow. Alright, you ready? We go for the rest of this? Get in there, now we take the rest of the face off. Sleep is for beginners. He was here at 4, I was here at 3:30.
Yep.
When do you think you'll finish your day here, Charles?
Oh, I'm gonna guess another 20 minutes. Thanks for coming, bye-bye.
The idea in this movie was to not have a conventional haunted house, you know, an old house with dark corridors. The house is all glass. It is completely, you can see through every wall of the house.
I've always liked houses partly in construction. We don't have walls and things like that, and I incorporated that into the design of this. So when you walk around the house, obviously you just see these pillars holding up the house, and you see right across to the other rooms.
Hello.
Wow, you can see right through it. How weird.
Guess Uncle Cyrus wasn't too keen on privacy.
I sure hope the bathroom's in the basement.
The feel of the film, visually, is really important to the audience. They get a whole character feeling for this house, which is moving and it's almost alive.
If you, for example, went up a staircase, well, 2 minutes later, that staircase would not be there. It would actually be facing in a different direction. So everything is moving. It's like a three-dimensional maze. So the characters in the story are constantly trying to get their bearings and unravel this puzzle. And for an actor, by the end of the day, your brain is just kind of cooked.
where normally you have a crickety old house up on a hill somewhere. This is state-of-the-art glass. You can see everything. And within that, you see the ghosts from all angles.
The first thought that came to my mind when I saw the house was, who took the time to inscribe all of that Latin on the wall? Just so we all clear, Miss Maggie does not do windows, okay?
The writing on the walls is from, there's a book in the film, it's very important, called The Arcanum. And in the book, it has all these writings and drawings and sketches. And we incorporated that into the set, into the walls, and they serve as a trap device for the ghost. The ghost can't break through the walls because of the etching.
Come on out now, pal.
Robert, stop screwing around.
Hey, Glass Family Robinson, you're wasting your breath. This is Ectobar glass. He's not gonna hear you, see? This is shatterproof and soundproof.
So what are these?
That's a little harder to explain. They're containment spells. See, ghosts can't cross those.
Ghosts?
Yes, ghosts.
This is the first set that we know of in the history of cinema that's been an entire glass house.
Difficult to shoot something like that for the cinematographer.
Now, one of the opportunities was the ability to shoot through walls and layers upon layers and kind of give us a really multi-textured kind of visual statement with the house. The other problem, though, is, of course, we could see all the way through the house and all the way to the other side where people were standing around and, having coffee and donuts. So we had to be very careful about how we arranged our camera and how things were reflected, which was possibly our major issue.
For anybody that's not actually on the set working, that you're not cast, you're anyone else around the set, you have to wear all dark colors.
I mean, you'll have a reflection here from something way over here, and you try to find out what it's from. And so we try and have most of the crew wearing dark clothing. But, I mean, you can only have so many black shirts and pants.
Everyone has to cover up, stay dark, don't move. There's a lot going on.
When you're making a movie when you're having reflections, it's horrible because you have reflections. You can't see the crew, you can't see the cameraman, you can't see the camera, so you always have to be off axis a little bit so you can't really see everything. And it was, not easy, but we did it, and it's worth it. Shooting the movie, as we say in The Matrix, it's the initial capture. It's the first image that you take, when you initially capture the image, then you add everything to it.
Our visual effects aren't so much based on visually manipulating an image. They're more or less adding production value to things that are best gone through in a visual effects form. For example, this house is powered by an immense machine in the basement. You can never build that machine in reality. So we're having to go to computer graphics to construct it.
My name is Michael Fink, and I'm the Senior Visual Effects Supervisor at Cinesight. In the case of 13 Ghosts, almost every shot was integrating a 3D element, three-dimensional element with a pre-photographed plate.
When we're talking about 3D elements, we're talking about elements that can be seen from all sides, that can move in all directions. The 3D process involves creating a model. At the same time, shaders are developed that take the textures and apply them to the model. Then it gets animated and lit.
After we've created the element, made sure the match move works, and the textures stick to the model and don't go anywhere else, and then the lighting matches, then it's up to the compositors, after all of those elements are rendered, to put the shot together.
This is the background plate that was shot on location. As you can see, there's not much to it, just a little bit of moving doors. So what I would do after this gets scanned, I would bring this into the computer and color correct this as best as possible, and then send that to the 3D lighters so they have something really nice to match to 3D lighting-wise. So then the 3D guys deliver the CG element. I would extract it off of this black frame and actually put it onto that background. Our 3D guys also went in and they built 3D glows so that the rings and all the little tiny rings and the lights at the top of the clockworks have this really nice glow.
Even though we look at something as a unit, the machine, the clockworks, it's made up of many different parts.
The door element was a live action piece that was shot on location as well, that I was responsible for extracting off this black piece of cloth. Our guys downstairs in the roto department will actually hand draw frame by frame shapes so we can extract something off an image and put it onto another image. And then we would come to the green screen and I would extract her off the green screen, making sure that I keep all the nice edge detail. Once I get all the elements together, I'll bring them in, I'll layer them in the correct order, maybe fine-tune their edges a little bit more, put them all together for the final render. We would end up with a shot like this.
The challenge in creating a practical modeled element is that you want the element to look properly set into the scene, which means that you really have to take care to make sure that the lighting, shadows, the highlights, the atmosphere, all that stuff matches the photograph plate so that the two images look like they're all one and one doesn't look like just postage stamp on top.
The house was very hard to match because, again, you're looking at a real physical presence on the first floor, and for some of the shots we built a second floor.
And they went out on location to show the bigger view of the house, both stories. They actually didn't have anything out there. It was just a piece of grass. So that's why you would see the light here for the grass interaction from the house. This is the actual 3D house, very complex, a lot of 3D tracking. The camera has a nice tilt on it.
The matching of the CG part of the house to the live action part, in terms of matching lighting, is one trick, but to match its position so that as the camera moves, it doesn't slide against the house, the real part of the house, is a pretty difficult task.
3D trackers will do their track, and then they'll pass that, what they call that camera, onto the lighter and the animators. So then they know what they're dealing with. Then the lighter will fully light the object using different lights, and then the animator had to move each and every one of these individual panels. Here's what we call a Z-depth matte. Now the purpose of the Z-depth matte is you can see how there's a dark red back here and a much more intense red here. This gives us flexibility to blur objects in the house or color objects in the house depending on the brightness of that red value. These are the 3D light fixtures. This is one of our mist layers that went over the house. A shot like this, from beginning to end, from like full development to the final, it probably took about a couple months. It's kind of mind-boggling. And that all leads to the final composite of this.
It's time to leave.
I'll take your word for it.
Initially, when we received the movie, we had first thought that it was ghosts. You think of ghosts as traditional, transparent images floating and stuff, but this was more like Sixth Sense, Beetlejuice type of ghosts. But one ghost did need little help. We received this film frame, and basically they had the stuntman wear a black head, so that allowed us to withhold information behind. And so what we did was cut out his head and replace it with a neck. This neck is 3D. It's fully CG here. We created the whole thing. It's very gross. We had several people that didn't even want to come close to working on that part, but I felt fine with it.
The torso.
We had little time and a huge amount of work to accomplish, and I think I'm pretty happy.
I think we delivered to our audience something that they really want to see. It's a really fun, scary movie. It's a really incredible ride, and the music and the visual effects and the actors all help us get through it. And it's really I'm really proud of it.
Hello. My name, as I'm sure you already know, is Cyrus Kritikos. I am a collector of many fine things. You are approaching my favorite and most treasured room in the house, my library. The very room, in fact, where all of my research and plans were devised. These souls you are about to meet are my lifeblood and have become, well, like family to me. Each lived a tormented and brutal life, but I assure you, in death, they serve a more fruitful purpose. Each one of these artifacts symbolizes one of 12 captured souls, or shall I say, ghosts. Please, select an object. I will be more than happy to tell you their pathetic little story. I'm sure you will find it most amusing. Most people have gambled at least once in their life, but for Jimmy the Gambler Gambino, betting was his life and death. The son of a bookie, Jimmy spent his childhood days at the track instead of at school and his nights in the gambling dens of seedy bars. Eventually, Jimmy opened a booking business of his own. Unable to turn down a bet, he barely covered his payoffs. Jimmy's reputation caught the attention of made man Larry the Finger Vitello. Larry approached Jimmy to place a large bet on the long shot in a heavyweight fight. Jimmy knew the risk, but needed to uphold his reputation, so he shook hands with Larry and sealed his fate. As his fighter took a deciding blow, Jimmy fainted to the floor. When Jimmy came to, Larry had arrived to collect his winnings, but Jimmy was cleaned out, so Larry made an example out of him. Actually, several small examples. He chopped him into little pieces, wrapping them in cellophane and dumping them into the ocean. Together they formed the pieces which completed my search for the torso. Margaret Shelburne, the dire mother, was a shy woman who could never stand up for herself, partly because she rose to only a mere 3 feet in height. Since childhood, she was stared at for her pint size. Her own mother would even sometimes dress her like a doll. Margaret didn't care, as long as she found some perverse form of acceptance. A carnival barker named Jimbo put her on display in his freak show. Life was horrible, being an attraction for people to gawk at. One night, while sweeping up a donkey pen, she was raped by the tall man. She spawned a beastly offspring of her own. Oh, she loved her dear son Harold more than life itself, never letting him out of her sight. The circus workers teased and tormented them relentlessly, a conflict that played itself out with bloody resolve that left nearly the entire circus free of life, including poor Margaret and Harold. Well, as they say, there's no business like show business. Before he became my firstborn son, little Billy Michaels was simply a stubborn brat. His obsession with the world of cowboys and Indians took precedent over all else. Any attempt to drag Billy out of his fantasy world sent him flying into a rage. His parents thought it all a harmless phase, until the day that a neighbor boy discovered a real bow and arrow in his father's closet and taunted the notorious Cowboy Billy into a duel. But Billy's toy cap gun was no match for the steel-tipped arrow that took his life. His rebellious attitude and refusal to accept defeat was a perfect fit for my violent circle of angry spirits. The angry princess was a young woman whose beauty became her ruin. Dana Newman was blessed with the natural looks of a goddess, but cursed with an inability to recognize it. Her vanity and insecurity was only fueled by a string of abusive boyfriends. By the time of her 20s, depression had dragged Dana into a downward spiral of self-loathing that doctors struggled to save her from. Her desperate search for perfection led to employment with a plastic surgeon, where her wage was paid in nose jobs, breast implants, and an endless array of other needless procedures. Alone in the office one night, Dana tried to perform surgery on herself in a desperate attempt to remove an unperceivable imperfection on her face. The unorthodox procedure went horribly wrong, and she was left blinded in one eye. She finally gave up on achieving perfection and mutilated herself in a bathtub until her veins ran dry. When they found her, they said that she was as beautiful in death as she was in life. The Torn Prince was a boy born in 1940 by the name of Royce Clayton. At 17, Royce was a star slugger on his baseball team. Every college in the country courted him, all offering first-class tickets out of his miserable small-town life. But fate threw Royce a curveball in the form of a local greaser who challenged him to a drag. Royce held his own for the first half-mile, then suddenly lost control of his little sweetheart. The hot rod flipped 3 times before bursting into flames. His peers watched in horror as the fire engulfed their fallen hero. Needless to say, he never escaped his small-town life. His remains still buried in a small plot overlooking his beloved ball field. Ryan Q, the man who became the Jackal, was born in 1887 to a prostitute. Ryan later developed a sick and insatiable appetite for the female gender, attacking prostitutes and stray women with the cunning of a wild animal. As a means to cure his insatiable appetite, Ryan committed himself to Borehamwood Asylum. After years of imprisonment in a padded room, he went completely insane, scratching at the walls so violently that his fingernails were torn completely off. The doctors kept him permanently bound in a straitjacket, tying it tighter when he acted out, causing his limbs to contort horribly. Still fighting to free himself, Ryan gnawed through his straitjacket until the doctors finally locked his head in a cage and sealed him away in a dark basement cell. There, he grew to hate any kind of human contact, screaming madly and cowering whenever approached by people. When a fire broke out in the asylum, everyone but Ryan escaped. He chose to stay behind and meet his deserved fate. Miss Isabella Smith was my choice for The Pilgrimess. Her story began in 1675 when the orphaned Isabella journeyed from England in the hope of finding a comfortable home in a quaint New England town. But problems began soon after she arrived. The tight-knit townsfolk didn't trust outsiders. When their livestock started to die mysteriously, the town's preacher accused Isabella of witchcraft. She denied the claim, but the town quickly turned against her. As more livestock fell ill, the preacher acquired a mysterious illness. The town rallied into a frenzy, cornering Isabella in a farmhouse, which they lit on fire. But moments later, Isabella miraculously crawled out, still alive, and without a single burn upon her skin. The astounded townsfolk sentenced her to a slow death in the stocks. There she stayed for weeks while children stoned her, women cursed her, and men spat on her. The humiliation proved worse than the pain. Finally, Isabella succumbed to starvation. Whether or not she was a witch, I can't say, but her powerful anguish served my needs well. The Juggernaut was known in life as Horace Breaker Mahoney. Horace was born oversized and horribly disfigured, spending his childhood as an outcast. His mother abandoned him at an early age, and his father put him to work in their junkyard, where Horace's teenage years were spent alone, crushing and chopping up old cars. His father died, and with no parent to steer him, the 7-foot-tall giant snapped. His first kill was a pair of female hitchhikers. He drove them back to the junkyard and tore them apart with his bare hands, feeding the pieces to his dogs. Many more kills followed. His M.O. was towing stranded motorists back to the yard where he would meticulously break every bone in their bodies. But his luck ran out, as it always does, the night he picked up an undercover female cop. It took over a dozen men to subdue the immense giant, 3 of whom lost their lives when Horace broke free of his handcuffs. But poor Horace's struggle eventually ended when 5 officers pumped nearly 50 rounds of ammo into him, and then another clip into his lifeless corpse, just to be sure. One of the strangest ghosts I caught had to be Harold Shelburne, the Great Child. His 3-foot-tall mother, Margaret Shelburne, was wildly overprotective of her son, smothering and spoiling him from infancy, and never stopping as he grew. Harold could barely care for himself, and as a result, remained in diapers his entire life. Mocked at every turn, they sought refuge with the traveling freak show run by a man named Jimbo. But even a life in the circus was no escape, as they were continually taunted and tormented by their own twisted kind. One night, some of the freaks kidnapped Margaret as a cruel joke. In a panic-fueled rage, Harold destroyed the entire carnival in search of his mother. When he finally found her, she had died of suffocation. Filled with hatred, Harold grabbed an axe and had his revenge on the freaks, displaying what was left of them in the carnival for every paying customer to see. When Jimbo found out what had happened, he had Harold mutilated beyond what you or I can comprehend. Well, maybe you. And you thought your family was weird. My easiest choice had to have been The Withered Lover, considering Jean Criticos was my nephew's wife. Her burnt and tortured soul held just the magnitude of suffering I required. As a wife and mother, Jean was loving and devoted. I must say that my nephew married a wonderful and proper woman. But their happiness came to a fiery end one fateful night. After decorating the family Christmas tree, the family had snuggled together in front of a roaring fire. In the dead of the night, a still smoldering log rolled out onto the carpet, igniting it instantly. The smoke alarm sent Arthur into one of his famous panics. He rushed down the hall to save his children, assuming, of course, that his wife would head outside. Arthur soon realized he had assumed wrong. The firemen kept Jean's family from going back in after her. Poor Arthur was devastated by not saving her, but her oh-so-tragic death served my needs perfectly. George Markley was a happy, honest blacksmith in the early 1890s before the horrific events that transformed him into the Hammer. A hard-working man named Nathan wrongfully accused Mr. Markley of stealing and threatened to run him out of their booming town. Knowing he was innocent, George stood up to Nathan and refused to move. One day, when George's wife and 2 children were walking home from the market, Nathan and his gang of thugs attacked them, brutally killing them. Enraged, George tracked down Nathan and his friends and beat them to a pulp with his massive blacksmith's hammer. The local townspeople captured George and dragged him back to his shop, where he received a brutal form of frontier justice. Tied to a tree, nails were driven deep into his body with his own hammer. They finished the job by cutting off his most prized possession, his hand. Crudely fastened to his severed appendage was the tool of his livelihood, the hammer, readied for one last chance at vengeance. The bound woman's name was Susan LeGros. Born with a silver spoon in her mouth, Susan had it all. Her parents were the wealthiest people in town, which made Susan the most popular girl at school. Life couldn't have been more perfect, but Susan's one flaw was how she treated men. Flirting and toying with whomever she chose, she left a long trail of broken hearts. Her friends warned she'd live to regret her ways, and they were half right. In Susan's senior year, she dated the star football player Chet Walters. The night of the senior prom, Chet caught his prom queen in another boy's arms. The next morning, the boy was found clubbed to death, and Susan was missing. 2 weeks later, Susan's body was found, buried beneath the football field's 50-yard line, bound in rope and strangled to death. Arrested and put on death row, Chet's last words were, "The bitch broke my heart, so I broke her neck." That jealous monster would have made a nice compliment alongside Susan. Such wretched words and behavior, but his results were quite fitting.
Got the city.